Okay, Chad, what we're going to do today is we're going to begin the fitting of your roll-on suction socket. And one of the important things for us is to really be able to establish where the distal end pressure is going to be. So what I'd like you to do first is roll your liner on. You can put this sock on and just bear some weight on it. Not 100% of your weight right now, because since you don't have any distal contact, you'll sink a little bit deep in there. So let's just go ahead and stand up on it and see how far you go in there. And just to that's a good reasonable amount of pressure. So we want probably about 60% of your weight on there right now. Okay, that would be fine.
All right.
Yeah, and is the bottom feel, you're lacking that pressure down there right now, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go around here and I'm going to mark. You can clearly see now where he's lost contact on the bottom. That's one of the things we do when we normally do these fittings. We extend that socket because we want to have enough room back there to be able to backfill the socket and decide exactly where the weight's going to be. So I'm going to plan on doing my injection hole right in the front, and I'm going to put some real tiny little holes all the way around where he starts to lose contact with the socket. So I'm just going to mark that now, and I'll get back there and drill some little holes in that in just a second here. Okay. Now, Chad, what's it feeling like on the bottom? Do you feel like it's hurtful if you don't have anything down there, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to get you in a position where you feel like you're fitting pretty well upstairs here around the knee, and then I'll backfill the bottom. We'll let you walk on that and see what it feels like, and we can determine what's going on from there. I'm also going to use a much smaller drill just to let some of this silicone exit out of the socket. So as we're pumping this full of silicone, we're actually not lifting them up out of the socket. So I'll go right where I marked all my holes. This is where it has started to lose contact with the socket, and that's where we want to have our vents. So 3 or 4 of those vents is usually enough. It's not necessary to put, to pepper the thing full of holes, but we'll get enough in there, and you'll see how this silicone will vent out of these holes. Okay, the next step we're going to do now is, Chad, we're going to cover up the stocking with some of this this foil here, and just to keep the silicone from actually sticking to the socket itself. So if you could hold that for me for a second, let me pull this out, and we'll wrap this around there and keep those socks nice and clean, and prevent them from being bonded into the prosthesis with the silicone. We have tried a number of other techniques to isolate his limb from the silicone. It still seems like the cellophane works the best. One of the things we do have to do, though, is we've got to always get some kind of powder or something on the outside of the silicone so it'll still slide in the socket. So we're going to powder this up just a little bit here so you can slide this back on. Without that, believe it or not, the socket won't go on. The plastic will stick so tightly to the check socket that I'll never be able to don this. So let's go ahead and step down in there again. Remember, we want about 40–50% of your weight. So we're all ready to start injecting the material now. I'm going to cover up the shoe first. One, it won't stick to anything but themselves, glass, and cloth. So you really want to be careful to protect somebody's footwear before you do a procedure like this, so you might be buying them a new pair of shoes. The material that we're going to use is the Silicone Replicator. This is a fairly high durometer and a fairly quick setting silicone. The couple advantages that you get from this silicone is, one, you can do this while somebody's standing in place. It's also one of the few silicones that is, if it's necessary, you could actually pull this pad out later and then grind on it to relieve any spots that might occur, any tight spots or sore spots that might occur. Break off the tip and go ahead and apply the static mixing nozzle. This will automatically take this 50-50 mixture, fold it through the static mixing nozzle, and completely mix it before it enters the socket. So you feel okay with the amount of weight you have on there right now? That feels okay? Yeah. Okay, then let me go ahead and start to inject this material there. Normally this material sets in 5 minutes, and what we've done is we've set these cartridges by little space heater for a second here, just to warm them up a little bit. To try to cut that 5 minutes down to about 3. Assure us real good total contact on the distal end of the leg. You can see we're starting to vent through some of the holes now. And as soon as I see this feather up to the edge, I'm going to stop because we don't want to hydraulically lift him right out of the socket. So we'll go ahead and let it fill up a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is there's going to be a lot of pressure in there, so I'm going to try to control that with my finger a little bit. We're going to let some of the pressure out. And then as soon as I feel like this is not pressurized anymore, I'm going to seal it off and hold it in place. The material now is starting to stiffen up pretty well. I should be able to get my finger off here in a minute. But one of the things we want to do is we want to leave the ends of these little drips sticking out through the holes. That helps to physically lock that replicator inside the socket so it won't pull out with ambulation. So we'll just let that set. Eventually, once it's completely set, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away some of this, cover up those holes with a little piece of tape so we don't risk any air leaking in there during ambulation, and we'll see what kind of suspension and what kind of fit we have. You want to keep checking the material on a pretty regular basis. You can almost set your watch to this setting up in somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes, depending on the ambient temperature of the room and or how much you've pre-warmed the cartridges. You want to leave this in there until it doesn't draw up when you touch it. As long as it's drawing up when you touch it, this material's not ready to take loose yet. So we need to let that sit for that full 3 to 5 minutes or until it's no longer tacky. I'm going to go back and check this one more time. You can feel now, I can tell that this is stiffened up a whole bunch. We can check it on the paper here. You can see the stuff starting to release from the paper. It's no longer very sticky on there. That usually gives me an indication that we're ready to also release from the inside. So Chad, if you would go ahead and sit down for just a second. And what we want to do is we want to just lift this up, and I'm going to try to pull it off real slowly. And the idea is we want it to release from the plastic film before it pulls away from the socket. So we'll just pull the leg out of there very slowly to begin with. There we go. Okay. So now Chad's completely out there. You can see the film came out with him. But now if you look carefully down in the bottom of the socket, the couple things you can clearly see is we've had the edges feather up very nicely into the edge of the socket. So we're sure we've got good total contact distally. You can see the imprint of the mounting spot for the pin the pin that will eventually reach down the receiver. But this is going to tell us really two things that are very important: where the exact end of the distal is, where the exact distal end is, and also the location of that pin when we get ready to apply the receiver to the model. Okay, Chad, now that we've got the distal end completely injected with the replicator, let's go ahead and put this back on for a second. And you can pull up your suspension sleeve, and let's see what that distal end actually feels like. And let me know if you feel any discomfort down there, and I'll go back and make some minor modifications on that pad if it's necessary. So Chad, how's that feeling on the end down there now? You feel too much pressure someplace down there, or is it pretty close? Or
feels great.
Really? So you don't think right now I need to whittle on that pad at all to change it at all, huh?
Not as far as the bone goes.
Okay.
It's not bottoming out. I don't feel it bottoming out.
And not excess up. You don't feel like you're bearing too much weight on the very end of your leg either, huh?
No.
Okay. Well, that's something you have to be aware of. If you're making one of these pads for somebody, and they do say they feel like there's a little bit too much pressure on, let's say, the distal end of the tibia, we'll show you a little later on how you can actually go in and grind on this pad a little bit to improve the fit. Well, one of the reasons I find that it's so important to do this procedure with the roll-on liners, in a lot of cases, it's probably the most critical area when you're using a roll-on liner, to make sure that you don't have too much pressure distally, or to make sure you don't have enough pressure distally. So the silicone injection with the Renew replicator seems to be a real accurate way to determine where that distal end belongs. And it does give you the ability, doing the check socket fittings here and the trail walking, to go back and make some modifications if it was necessary.